The men in the bright yellow suits told us not to panic. But it's hard to stay calm when you see them carrying screaming devices that measure poison you can't see. They told us our neighborhood was a radiological contamination site, and it was all because of the secret my teenage neighbor Dave was hiding in his garden shed. My name isn't important. What is important is that I'm telling you this so you understand the fragility of safety. I grew up in Commerce Township, Michigan, the kind of place where everyone's lawn is neatly trimmed and nothing truly bad is supposed to happen. We thought we knew our neighbors. We were wrong. The most terrifying things don't come from a dark forest. They can be born in the place you least expect, nurtured by obsession, and hidden right next door. My neighbor was David Hahn. To most, Dave was just a quiet, awkward kid. He was a Boy Scout, but his real passion was chemistry. While we were playing video games, Dave was in his basement trying to create nitroglycerin. After a few too many explosions at his dad's house, his main laboratory moved to his mom's potting shed, right next to my yard. His mom encouraged him, thinking he was a budding genius. We all just saw it as a quirky hobby. My dad would just shake his head and say, "That kid is going to burn the house down one day." If only the danger had been something as simple as fire. Dave's obsession was ignited by a book called The Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments. When he had mastered every page, he set a new, staggering goal: to collect a sample of every single element. This is where his hobby began its journey into a nightmare. Realizing he couldn't just buy the things he wanted, he created an alias. Professor Hahn, a high school physics teacher. He wrote letters to chemical companies, scientific supply houses, even the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, asking for information and small samples for his students. Shockingly, they often responded, mailing the building blocks of a radiological disaster right to his door. His focus soon narrowed to the most powerful and dangerous elements, the radioactive ones. He was determined to build a model nuclear breeder reactor, a device so complex and dangerous that even professional physicists struggle with it. And he was going to build it in a wooden shed. He knew he needed sources. His first target was americium-241. He discovered it was used in virtually every smoke detector. So he began his harvest, collecting hundreds of them from surplus stores and abandoned buildings. I remember seeing him once, sitting in his garage with a huge pile, meticulously prying out the tiny foil-like button from each one. He was building a neutron source, the trigger for a nuclear reaction. Next, he went after radium. He knew old clocks with glow-in-the-dark dials used radium paint. He haunted antique shops, buying up dusty, broken clocks for a few dollars each. At night, a strange, faint green glow would emanate from his shed. He was in there, carefully chipping the toxic, radioactive paint off the clock faces and concentrating it in a vial. That glow was also pouring out gamma radiation, passing through the thin walls of the shed and into our yards. But he needed something more potent. He learned that thorium, found in the mantles of gas camping lanterns, could be used as a nuclear fuel. He went to every hardware store in the area and bought their entire stock, claiming it was for a Boy Scout trip. He then took a blowtorch and burned thousands of these mantles into a fine, white, highly concentrated thorium ash. This process created a radioactive dust that could easily be inhaled. A dust that puffed into the air and settled on the grass, the trees, and my own backyard swing set. The shed was no longer a shed. It was a makeshift radiological facility. He had a lead-lined toolbox for shielding. He stored his materials in coffee cans and old vials. The place was a chaotic mess of wires, batteries, and the radioactive sources he had painstakingly gathered: americium, radium, and thorium. He even managed to get a small amount of uranium ore from a contact overseas. We started noticing things. A strange metallic smell would sometimes hang in the air. Dave himself began to look sick. His face was often red and peeling like a constant sunburn. He had sores on his hands that wouldn't heal. We thought it was just acne or a chemical burn. We were actually watching radiation poisoning happen in slow motion, completely unaware that the air we were breathing was becoming more toxic every day. The turning point came when his own creation terrified him. He had assembled his materials into a crude reactor core, wrapped in aluminum foil and duct tape. He finally saved up enough money to buy a Geiger counter to measure his success. This was the tool that would prove his genius. Instead, it revealed his horror. The moment he brought it near his creation, the device shrieked. The needle went off the scale. He backed away, but the frantic, desperate clicking filled the tiny shed. He ran outside with it. It was still screaming. He walked down the street. It wasn't until he was 5 doors down from his own house that the readings dropped to a level that wasn't immediately life-threatening. He realized in a moment of pure terror that he had lost control. The monster he had built was alive, and it was bathing our entire block in lethal energy. He panicked. He knew he had to dismantle it and hide the evidence. In the dead of night, he began to break down his reactor. He packed the most hot components into his lead-lined toolbox and threw the rest of his contaminated equipment into the trunk of his old Pontiac. His plan was insane. Drive out to the middle of nowhere and simply dump a radiological nightmare in the forest. He never made it. At 2:40 in the morning on August 31st, 1994, police saw his car weaving and pulled him over. Thinking he was a thief, they asked what was in the trunk. He warned them not to touch it, stating plainly that he had radioactive materials in his car. The officers, thinking it was a bizarre bluff, called in the bomb squad. The mystery of what was in Dave S.'s trunk led them all back to its source, his mother's unassuming little garden shed. That's when our world turned upside down. The next morning, our quiet street was swarming with government vehicles from the EPA and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Men in full-body, bright yellow hazmat suits began walking our street, carrying sophisticated equipment. They cordoned off Dave's house with yellow tape. When a neighbor asked what was wrong, one of the men simply held up a Geiger counter. The frantic, high-pitched screaming of the device said more than words ever could. We were told there had been a radiological incident. The investigation revealed a horror beyond our imagination. The radiation levels inside the shed were over 1,000 times higher than normal background radiation. Our neighborhood was declared a federal Superfund cleanup site. A specialized team had to dismantle the shed piece by piece as if it were a bomb. Every plank of wood, every tool, every speck of dirt was radioactive. They packed the entire shed and its contents into 39 sealed, lead-lined barrels. Those barrels were then shipped to a low-level radioactive waste disposal site deep in the Utah desert, the final resting place for a boy's deadly hobby. Our neighborhood was declared safe, but the illusion of safety was shattered forever. Our street became a local spectacle. People would drive by slowly, pointing at the empty patch of grass where the shed used to be. A few families on our block just packed up and left, unable to live with the invisible threat. And Dave? As a minor, he was never charged with a crime. He refused a full medical evaluation, so the true extent of his radiation exposure was never known. His life after that was a slow, tragic fallout from his teenage obsession. He struggled with his health for years. David Hahn died in 2016. He was only 39 years old. The official cause was related to alcohol, but for those of us who remember, we will always wonder. For years, I would think about that shed. I'd think about how close we all came to a much worse disaster. The true terror wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the quiet, creeping contamination. It was the sickening realization that for months, we were living, breathing, and playing in the invisible shadow of a homemade nuclear reactor. It's the horror of the unknown, the damage that may have already been done, silently, to all of us. We teach our children to be curious, to be ambitious. But Dave's story is a terrifying reminder that brilliance without wisdom is a curse. The most dangerous monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They are the ones we create ourselves, born from obsession and hidden in the most ordinary of places.